The Turquoise Thread of Destiny. Introduction. In the name of the storytellers who have walked before us, and in honor of those nights when Scheherazade herself wove tales to greet the dawn, I offer you this story. Let it carry you gently across deserts of sand and dreams, through cities wrapped in moonlight, and along paths where destiny walks beside us, silent as starlight. This is the tale of a young woman, a letter carried by night winds, and a thread as blue as the deepest waters of forgotten wells. It is a story of choices made in darkness, journeys begun with trembling hearts, and wisdom found not in arrival, but in the walking itself. Close your eyes, dear listener, and let us begin where all true journeys begin, in the quiet corners of an ordinary life, waiting for the extraordinary to unfold. Chapter 1. The Letter Under Night Wind. In a city where minarets touched the evening sky like fingers reaching for stars, there lived a young woman named Layla. Her name meant night in the old tongue, and truly she was born under such a sky, dark, deep, and full of mysteries yet unnamed. The city itself was neither grand nor small. Its walls were the color of honey in sunlight, its streets narrow and winding like the thoughts of poets. Orange trees grew in hidden courtyards, and fountains whispered their endless conversations with themselves. It was a place where merchants sold amber and almonds, where the call to prayer floated over rooftops 5 times each day, and where life moved with the gentle rhythm of seasons turning one into another. Layla lived in a house of modest beauty with her father, a man whose hair had gone silver like moonlight on water. Once, he had been a maker of instruments, lutes and odes whose voices could make even stones weep with longing. But time, that patient sculptor, had bent his fingers with its invisible hands, and now he worked more slowly, more carefully. Each note he coaxed from wood and string, a small victory against the passing years. Their home was simple, but filled with light. In the mornings, sun streamed through latticed windows, casting geometric shadows on tile floors. The courtyard held a small fountain, not grand, but theirs, and a fig tree that had known 3 generations of Layla's family. Her mother had planted it, they said, before Layla's first breath, and though her mother had departed this world when Layla was still small, the tree remained, bearing fruit each summer as if in remembrance. On this particular evening, as the sun descended behind the western walls and the sky turned the color of pomegranate seeds, Layla was returning from the market. Her basket held ordinary things: bread still warm from the baker's oven, dates sticky with sweetness, a bundle of mint for her father's tea. She walked slowly, as was her nature, observing the world around her, a cat stretching on a warm stone, children playing a game with pebbles, an old woman watering jasmine that spilled over her balcony like a fragrant waterfall. When she reached her door, a door painted blue to ward off evil, as was the custom, she found something unusual. There, tucked into the crack between door and frame, was a letter. Not a grand letter sealed with wax and bearing official marks, but a simple folded paper, tied with a single thread the color of turquoise, that particular blue-green that speaks of distant seas and stones worn smooth by ancient hands. Layla paused. Letters were not common in her life. Who would write to her, and who would deliver such a thing in this manner, without knock or announcement? She looked up and down the street, but saw only the usual evening movements: a merchant closing his shop, a boy driving 2 goats toward home, the lamplighter beginning his rounds with his long pole and steady flame. No mysterious messenger lingered in the shadows. No explanation offered itself from the cooling air. With careful fingers she untied the turquoise thread and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant but not ornate, clear and purposeful as the flight of a bird that knows its destination. To the daughter of Hamza, the instrument maker, it began. These words come to you from one who knew your father in days long past, before time carved its marks upon us both. I write to you now because the winds whisper that your father's health grows fragile, like a flame in an open window. There exists a remedy, not of common herbs or physician's knowledge, but of older wisdom kept in a place few know and fewer still can reach. It is a city beyond the great desert, where the sand meets stone and the stone meets sky. There, in a dwelling of those who have studied the hidden patterns of life itself, resides the knowledge that might restore what time has begun to take away. The journey is not short, nor is it without its difficulties, but you are your mother's daughter, as well as your father's, and she was one who did not turn away from difficult roads. In your blood runs the courage of those who chose love over comfort, purpose over safety. If you would make this journey, follow the trade routes east until you reach the last wells before the great sands. Ask there for the caravan of Rashid al-Qadir, who owes me a debt, and will honor it by granting you passage. Carry this thread with you, for it was woven by hands that understand the patterns beneath patterns, and it may serve you in ways both seen and unseen. I make no promises of what you will find, only of what might be found by one who seeks with a true heart. The choice, as always in matters of destiny, is yours alone to make. May the road rise gently to meet your feet, and may you find what you do not yet know you are seeking. The letter was unsigned, though at the bottom was drawn a simple symbol, a spiral within a circle, like water finding its center. Layla read the letter once, then twice, then 3 times as the light faded from blue to violet to the first darkness. Her hands, still holding the paper, trembled slightly, though whether from fear or excitement or something else entirely, she could not say. A remedy for her father, a journey across deserts, a city that might exist only in stories, and a thread, this turquoise thread now lying across her palm like a tiny river of color that supposedly held some power or purpose beyond mere tying and untying. The rational part of her mind, the part trained by years of helping her father with his accounts and managing their modest household, whispered that this was foolishness. Who sent letters without names? Who spoke of hidden cities and ancient wisdom? These were the elements of tales told to entertain, not the substance of real life. But another part of her, a part that perhaps she had not fully acknowledged until this moment, stirred like something waking from long sleep. This part remembered stories her mother had told her. Yes, she did remember them, though she had been so small. Stories of travelers and seekers, of paths that opened only for those brave enough to take the first step, of ordinary people who discovered they were capable of extraordinary things. And beneath all these thoughts, like a drum beating slow and steady, was the truth she could not avoid. Her father was indeed growing more frail with each passing season. The physicians could do little but offer herbs for pain and comfort. They spoke in kind voices about the natural order of things, about age being a journey all must take, about acceptance and grace. But what daughter accepts such things easily? What heart does not cry out against the fading of a beloved light? Layla stood at her door, the letter in one hand and the turquoise thread in the other, while the evening call to prayer floated over the rooftops, and the first stars began their ancient vigil in the darkening sky. She felt in that moment as if she stood at a threshold of more than just her house, as if the world itself had opened a door and was waiting, patient but not forever patient, for her to decide whether she would step through. From inside, she heard her father's cough, gentle but persistent, the cough that had become as much a part of their days as the fountain's whisper or the call of doves in the morning. The thread seemed to catch the last light, glowing softly against her skin. Destiny, Layla thought, might be too grand a word for what she felt. But something was happening, something had begun, and she could feel it as surely as she felt the cooling evening air on her face. She tucked the letter into her sleeve, wound the turquoise thread carefully around her wrist, and opened the door to go inside, where her father waited with his silver hair and patient smile, unaware that the daughter who entered was already, in some small but irrevocable way, different from the daughter who had left that morning for the market. The night wind rose, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and distance, of journeys not yet taken, and choices not yet made. And in a city where minarets touched the sky like prayers made stone, one more story began its slow unfurling, thread by thread, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. Chapter 2. Days Before the Road. The next morning arrived as mornings do, with the gradual brightening of sky from black to gray to gold, with the first calls of birds, with the familiar sounds of the city waking around her. Layla rose from her bed and went through her usual routines, washing her face in the basin, braiding her dark hair, dressing in the simple clothes she wore for working in their small shop. But nothing felt quite usual. The letter, now hidden in a wooden box beneath her clothes, seemed to pulse with invisible presence. The turquoise thread, which she had removed from her wrist for sleep, lay coiled beside it like a small serpent of color. She found herself touching the box several times, as if to confirm it was still there, that the previous evening had been real and not some fever dream. Their shop occupied the ground floor of their house, opening directly onto one of the market streets. It was a modest establishment where her father repaired instruments and sold strings, reeds, and other necessaries for musicians. Once he had crafted instruments here, but that had been years ago, before his hands had begun their slow rebellion against his wishes. Now, Layla managed most of the shop's operations, while her father sat in the corner, working slowly on simple repairs, replacing a string here, adjusting a peg there, offering advice to the young musicians who still sought his wisdom, if not his craftsmanship. On this morning, as she opened the shutters and arranged the small displays, her mind wandered far from the familiar street. She found herself imagining deserts she had never seen, cities that might or might not exist, journeys that belonged to stories rather than to the life of a shopkeeper's daughter. "You are distant today," her father observed. His voice was soft, slightly hoarse from the night's coughing, but warm with the affection that had been her anchor through all her years. "Am I?" Layla tried to smile, arranging a set of lute strings for the third time. "Forgive me, father, I slept poorly." "Dreams?" he asked, his fingers working slowly to wind a new string onto an oud that had been brought in for repair. "Something like that," she admitted, which was not quite a lie, but not quite the truth either. Her father nodded, accepting this as he accepted most things, with gentle patience. He had been like this for as long as she could remember, kind, quiet, moving through life with the steady grace of a man who had long ago made peace with both joy and sorrow. When her mother had died, he had not raged or broken. He had wept, yes, she remembered this, though she had been so small, but then he had dried his tears and continued the work of living, of raising his daughter, of making what beauty he could in the time allotted to him. Looking at him now, Layla felt her heart contract. The morning light showed clearly what she often tried not to see, how thin he had become, how the bones of his hands stood out like the elegant structure of the instruments he had once created, how his breathing required conscious effort, as if each breath were a deliberate choice rather than an automatic gift. The letter spoke truth. Time was taking him, slowly but certainly, the way water wears away even the hardest stone. "Father," she began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. He looked up from his work, his eyes, still clear and bright despite everything, meeting hers with a question. "If you could be healed," she said carefully, "truly healed, not just eased, but restored, what would you give for such a thing?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hands pausing in their work. Outside, a merchant was calling his wares, his voice rising and falling in the traditional sing-song of the marketplace. A donkey brayed, children laughed. Life continued its endless dance. "That is a curious question," her father finally said. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering," Layla said, but her voice betrayed her. Her father set down the oud and gave her his full attention. "Daughter of my heart, I have lived a good life. I have known love. Your mother was a gift beyond measure. I have known purpose. My instruments have brought joy to many, and I have known you, which is the greatest blessing of all. If my time is growing short, I have no complaints to make to the heavens." But what if it didn't have to be short? The words escaped before she could stop them. What if there was a way? A way? His expression was gentle but slightly concerned. "Layla, the physicians have been clear. I know what the physicians have said, but there are other kinds of knowledge, aren't there? Older wisdom, hidden places where—" She stopped herself, realizing she was revealing too much, that she was not ready yet to speak of the letter, to put into words the impossible possibility it represented. Her father studied her face for a long moment. "You have been reading those old tales again," he said, but his tone was not dismissive. "Your mother loved such stories. She believed in things I could not see, in patterns beneath the surface of the world." "Did she?" Layla moved closer. Her mother was a mystery to her, a presence felt more in absence than in memory, a shape she could not quite grasp no matter how hard she tried. "Oh yes," her father said, a smile softening his features. "She would say that the world is woven of both seen and unseen threads, and that those who pay attention can sometimes perceive the pattern. I, being a practical man, a maker of physical things, would tease her about this, but she would only laugh and say that my instruments proved her point, that what we create in the material world is only the visible expression of invisible music that exists eternally." He paused, his breath catching slightly, and Layla waited while he recovered it. "I loved her for this," he continued, "for her ability to see magic in the ordinary, to believe in possibilities I dismissed. Perhaps, in some ways, you are more her daughter than mine." Layla felt tears threatening and pushed them back. This was not the time for tears. This was the time for, what? Decision? Action? She was not sure yet. The morning progressed. Customers came and went. A young man seeking new strings for his qanun, an older woman whose grandson was learning the ney and needed a practice instrument, a musician from the palace, inquiring whether her father might, perhaps, consider crafting one more oud, a commission for which he would be well compensated. To this last, her father gave his standard response, that he no longer crafted instruments, that his hands would not obey such intricate commands, that there were younger makers who could serve better. The musician departed, disappointed but understanding, and Layla felt again that contraction of her heart, that grief for all her father could no longer do. At midday, When the sun was high and hot and most people retreated indoors, a young man appeared in the doorway of their shop. His name was Omar, and he was the son of their neighbor, the spice merchant. For 2 years now, he had been courting Layla with the patient persistence of water finding its path down a mountain. He was not a bad match. Indeed, by any practical measure, he was a good one. Handsome enough, kind, from a respectable family with a solid business. He made Layla laugh sometimes with his stories from the market, and he treated her father with respect. More than once her father had hinted that he would give his blessing to such a union, that he would die easier knowing his daughter was provided for, protected, loved. And yet, Layla had never quite been able to say yes. There was something that held her back, some part of herself that remained uncommitted, watching from a distance even as the rest of her went through the motions of courtship. "Layla," Omar greeted her with his usual warm smile. "I've brought dates from the south, the very best. My father says they're fit for princes. I thought perhaps you and your father might enjoy some." He held out a small package wrapped in palm leaves, and Layla accepted it with thanks. They spoke of small things, the heat of the day, the upcoming festival, a mutual acquaintance who was getting married. Normal conversation, comfortable and easy, but Layla found herself distracted, her mind returning again and again to the letter, to the impossible choice it presented. She must have shown this distraction, for Omar's expression grew concerned. "You seem troubled," he said. "Is something wrong? Is your father—" "He's well enough," Layla said quickly. I have much on my mind." Omar nodded, accepting this, though his eyes held questions. "You know," he said carefully, "that if you ever needed help, any kind of help, you could come to me. My family and we would do anything." "I know," Layla interrupted gently. "You're very kind, Omar. Truly." He lingered a moment longer, as if hoping she might say more, might give him some opening into whatever was troubling her. But when she remained silent, he took his leave, promising to return soon, his affection written clearly in every gesture. After he left, her father spoke from his corner. "He's a good young man." "Yes," Layla agreed. "He loves you." "I know." "And you?" her father asked gently. Layla was quiet, watching dust motes dance in a shaft of sunlight. "I have great affection for him," she said finally. "He would make a good husband." "But," her father prompted, hearing what she had not said. "But," Layla struggled to find words for something she barely understood herself. "But I feel as if I'm waiting for something, Father. As if there's something I need to do, or be, or find, before I can settle into the life that everyone expects of me." Her father nodded slowly. "Your mother said something similar once, before we married. She said she felt as if she had a journey to make first, though she didn't know where or why. I waited for her. When she returned, and she did return, though she never told me where she had been, she was ready to begin our life together. This was new information, a crack in the wall of mystery surrounding her mother. She went somewhere. Alone? I believe so, though she spoke of it only obliquely. She said that some knots must be untied before new threads can be woven. He smiled at the memory. She always spoke in such riddles. I loved her for it, even when I didn't understand. Layla felt something shift inside her, like a door opening just slightly, letting in a stream of light. Perhaps the letter was not as mad as it seemed. Perhaps such journeys were not only for stories, but for real people, real daughters, real lives. The afternoon wore on. The light changed, growing softer, the harsh brightness of midday giving way to the gentler gold of approaching evening. Fewer customers came. Her father dozed in his chair, his breath soft and slightly raspy. Layla sat at the counter, ostensibly working on the accounts, but in reality staring at nothing, her mind far away. She thought of the letter's words. The choice, as always in matters of destiny, is yours alone to make. Was it destiny, or was it foolishness? The kind of impractical dreaming that led to disappointment and waste. As the sun began its descent and the call to prayer floated over the city, Layla made a decision. She would need a sign, some confirmation that this was more than just words on paper, more than the ravings of someone who might be mad or mischievous or simply mistaken. She went to the box where she had hidden the letter and thread. She removed the turquoise thread and held it up to the fading light. It was beautiful, certainly, the color pure and deep, the weaving tight and even, but it was still just thread, wasn't it? Just dyed fiber, nothing more. It may serve you in ways both seen and unseen, the letter had said. Show me, Layla whispered to the thread, feeling foolish even as she spoke. If this is real, if this is meant to be, show me some sign. Nothing happened. The thread simply hung from her fingers, inert and ordinary. Layla felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. There, it was settled. The letter was just fantasy, the thread just thread. She would forget this foolishness, would focus on reality, on caring for her father in whatever time remained, on perhaps eventually saying yes to Omar and building the life that was expected, normal, safe. She started to put the thread away, but as she did, a breeze came through the open window. Strange, because the evening air had been still. The breeze caught the thread, making it spin and twist, and as it spun, it caught the light in such a way that it seemed almost to glow, to pulse with inner luminescence. And in that moment, suspended between day and night, between choice and inaction, Layla heard, or thought she heard, or imagined she heard, a sound like distant music, like the voice of an instrument played far away, its melody both strange and achingly familiar. The thread settled, the breeze died, and the moment passed. But it had been enough. Layla took a deep breath, her heart beating fast. I will go, she said aloud, speaking to the empty room, to the thread, to herself, to whatever invisible forces might be listening. I will make this journey. I will seek this city, this knowledge, this possibility. I will not let my father fade without trying, without walking whatever path might save him. The words, once spoken, seemed to change the very air around her. She had decided. The first step had been taken, even if only in her heart. That night, she lay in her bed, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced. There would be so much to prepare. Practical matters, arrangements for her father's care, supplies for the journey. And she would need to tell him somehow, though the thought of that conversation filled her with equal parts fear and determination. The turquoise thread lay on the small table beside her bed, coiled like a promise or a question, or perhaps both at once. Through the window she could see stars, those same stars that shone over deserts she had never seen, over the mysterious city that might or might not exist, over all the roads she might walk and all the versions of herself she might become. In the darkness, Layla smiled, a small smile of terror and excitement and hope. The daughter of Hamza, the instrument maker, the girl who had spent her life in one city, in one house, in one small circle of the known and the safe, was about to become a traveler, a seeker, a woman on a quest. The story was beginning. The threads were gathering, and though she could not yet see the pattern they would make, she could feel them pulling, calling, beckoning her toward something larger than the life she had known. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight, in the darkness and the starlight, Layla let herself simply be with her decision, with the first trembling joy of a journey begun, with the understanding that from this moment forward, Nothing would ever be quite the same. Chapter 3. Farewells at the Threshold. The morning after her decision dawned cool and clear, touched with that particular quality of light that seems to bless new beginnings. Layla rose before the sun, her body alert despite the sleepless night, as if some part of her had already begun the journey, while her physical form still rested in familiar rooms. She moved quietly through the house, not wanting to wake her father yet. There was much to consider, much to plan, and she needed these quiet hours to organize her thoughts before the difficult conversations that lay ahead. In the small courtyard, the fountain whispered its eternal song. The fig tree rustled in the pre-dawn breeze. Layla sat on the stone bench where she had sat countless times before, but this morning everything looked different, sharper, more precious, as if she were seeing it all for the first time or perhaps for the last time, though she refused to let that thought take root. She would return. She must return. This was not a farewell forever, but only for a season, only for as long as the journey required. Still, the thought of leaving her father made her chest tight with anxiety. Who would care for him while she was gone? Who would make his tea exactly as he liked it? Who would sit with him in the evenings and read to him when his eyes grew tired? Who would notice when his breath grew labored and bring him the herbs that eased his coughing? These practical worries circled her mind like birds seeking a place to land, but beneath them lay something deeper, the fear that in pursuing this hope of healing, she might lose the precious time that remained. What if the journey took too long? What if she returned to find him gone? What if her seeking became the very thing that kept her from being where she should be, at his side, in his final days? "You're awake early." Her father's voice startled her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, wrapped in his sleeping robe, his silver hair loose around his shoulders. In this light, he looked almost like a spirit, something made of dawn and memory rather than flesh and bone. "I couldn't sleep," Layla admitted. "Father, come sit. There's something I need to tell you." He moved slowly, carefully, lowering himself onto the bench beside her. He said nothing, only waited with that infinite patience that was so characteristic of him, giving her space to find her words. "A letter came," Layla began, and then the whole story spilled out. The mysterious correspondence, the promise of healing, the city beyond the desert, the turquoise thread, her decision to go. She spoke quickly, nervously, watching his face for signs of anger or dismissal or fear, but her father's expression showed none of these things. Instead, he listened with a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, his eyes distant as if seeing something beyond the courtyard walls. When she finished, silence hung between them for a long moment. A bird sang from the fig tree. The fountain continued its quiet conversation with itself. "Your mother," her father finally said, "would have gone without hesitation. She would have said that such letters do not arrive by accident, that the thread of turquoise is a sign, that destiny speaks in many languages, and it is our duty to listen." "And you?" Layla asked, her voice small. "What do you say?" He turned to look at her fully, and she saw in his eyes something she had not expected. Not fear or anger, but pride. "I say that you are indeed your mother's daughter. I say that I have watched you these past years, so dutiful, so careful, so devoted to my care. It has brought me great comfort, but I have also wondered sometimes if, in caring for me, you were neglecting to care for the calling of your own heart." "But Father, I can't just leave you." He raised a hand gently. "Daughter, I am not so frail that I will crumble in your absence, and we have neighbors, friends. Old Fatima next door has already told me a dozen times that I should let her bring me meals, that I need a woman's care. She will be delighted to have her meddling made useful." Despite her anxiety, Layla smiled. Fatima was indeed a force of nature, a widow who had outlived 3 husbands and seemed determined to outlive everyone else as well through sheer stubbornness and the aggressive application of good cooking. "And," her father continued, there is something else to consider. If this remedy exists, if this knowledge is real, then you going is not an abandonment, but an act of love. You are not leaving me. You are seeking a way to keep me. How can I object to that? But what if I'm gone too long? What if—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "What if I die while you're away?" Her father spoke the words she couldn't. "Layla, I will die someday regardless. That is the nature of life. The only question is how we spend the days we are given. Would you have me forbid this journey out of fear? Would you have yourself refuse it for the same reason? Or shall we both be brave enough to honor what calls to you?" Tears spilled down Layla's cheeks. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of course you are. Fear is wisdom's companion on any worthwhile journey." He took her hand in both of his, those hands that had once coaxed such music from wood and string, now gentle and fragile, but still warm, still alive, still capable of comfort. "But don't let fear be your only companion. Take courage with you as well. Take hope. Take the love that binds us, which is not broken by distance or even by the veil between life and death." They sat together as the sun rose fully, painting the courtyard in gold and rose. Layla felt something settle in her chest, not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger, something that could carry fear along with it and still move forward. "When will you leave?" her father asked. "As soon as I can make arrangements." The letter said to find the caravan of Rashid al-Qadir at the last wells before the desert. "I'll need to discover when he travels, to gather supplies, She paused. "To say my goodbyes." "Then we should begin," her father said. "There's much to do." The next days passed in a flurry of preparation. Layla discovered, through inquiries in the market, that Rashid al-Qadir was indeed a real person, a respected caravan master who made the eastern journey twice yearly, carrying goods to and from the cities on the desert's edge. His next departure was set for 10 days hence, which gave her barely enough time to prepare. She gathered supplies carefully, sturdy clothing suitable for travel, a warm cloak for cold desert nights, a water skin, dried foods that would keep, a small knife, a blanket. Her father insisted on giving her a small leather purse of coins, more than she thought they could spare. But he was adamant. "Your mother left these," he said, pressing the purse into her hands. "She told me they were for when they would be needed. I think she somehow knew even then that you would one day take a journey like hers." The thought of her mother's foresight was both comforting and unsettling. Had her mother known? Had she seen somehow into this future moment? Layla told no one else the true purpose of her journey. To the neighbors and customers who inquired, she said only that she was traveling east to visit a distant aunt, that she would return before the winter rains. Most accepted this explanation without question, though a few offered knowing looks that suggested they saw more than she said. Omar was harder to face. He came to the shop 3 days before her planned departure, his usual cheerfulness dimmed by the news of her leaving. "But why now?" he asked, confusion and hurt mingling in his voice. "Is it something I've done? Have I pressed too hard for an answer to my courtship?" "No, Omar, it's nothing like that." Layla tried to find words that were true without being the complete truth. "It's something I need to do for my father. Please don't ask me to explain more than that. How long will you be gone?" I don't know, a month, perhaps 2, maybe longer, and you'll come back? There was a vulnerability in his voice that made her heart ache. Yes, she said, and prayed it was not a lie. I will come back. He studied her face for a long moment, and she wondered what he saw there. What mixture of determination and fear and hope was written in her eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. I will wait for you, he said. However long you're gone, I will wait. And when you return, perhaps then you'll be ready to give me an answer. Perhaps, Layla agreed, unable to promise more. He left her with a small package, dried apricots from his father's shop, wrapped carefully. For your journey, he said, may they sweeten the hard roads. After he was gone, Layla allowed herself a few tears. She did care for Omar. In another life, a simpler life, she could imagine being happy as his wife, raising children, growing old in the same streets where she had grown up. But that imagined life felt like a dream she was waking from, like a path she could see clearly, but could no longer walk. The night before her departure, her father invited her to sit with him in his workroom, a small space off the courtyard where he kept his tools and his instruments, where the walls were hung with half-finished projects and old drawings, where the smell of wood and varnish spoke of decades of craft and care. I want to show you something, he said, moving to a cabinet in the corner. From it, he drew out an oud, not one of his usual instruments, but something clearly special. The wood glowed even in the dim lamplight. The inlay work was extraordinarily delicate, and the proportions were perfect, with an elegance that took the breath. Your mother's oud, he said softly. I made it for her before we married, when my hands still obeyed my wishes perfectly. She played it rarely, said it was too beautiful to use for ordinary music, that it was waiting for a song that had not yet been written. He held it out to Layla. I can't give you much for this journey, but I can give you this. Your mother would want you to have it. But Father, I don't play. Perhaps you will learn, or perhaps you will find someone who should have it, someone whose music needs this particular voice, or perhaps it will simply travel with you, a piece of your mother and of me, accompanying you even when we cannot. Layla took the oud carefully, reverently. It was lighter than she expected, balanced perfectly, and even without being played, it seemed to hum with potential, with waiting music. Thank you, she whispered, her throat tight with emotion. They sat together through the evening, her father telling her stories of her mother that he had never shared before, how they met, how she had challenged him to see beyond the visible world, how she had taught him that love was both the gentlest and the strongest force in existence. She used to say, he told Layla as the night deepened, that we are all notes in a song we cannot fully hear, that what seems like discord in one moment becomes harmony when heard from eternity's perspective. I didn't understand then. I'm not sure I understand now, but I trust it. And I trust that your journey, whatever comes of it, is part of that larger song. I love you, Father, Layla said, the words feeling both inadequate and infinitely important. And I you, my daughter, more than all the music I've ever made or ever will make. They embraced, and Layla committed every detail to memory. The feel of his thin shoulders, the smell of his soap, and the wood smoke from the brazier, the sound of his heartbeat, steady and determined despite his body's frailty. The morning of departure came too quickly and too slowly. Layla rose in the deep darkness before dawn, dressed in her traveling clothes, and gathered her few possessions. The turquoise thread she wound carefully around her wrist. The letter she tucked into an inner pocket. The oud she wrapped in soft cloth and secured in a leather case her father had fashioned for it. Her father was already awake, sitting in the courtyard with 2 cups of tea steaming in the cool air. They drank together in silence, watching the stars fade and the sky lighten from black to indigo to the pale blue of beginning. "The caravan gathers at the eastern gate," her father finally said. "You should go soon if you want to meet them at the appointed time." Layla nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. At the door, that blue door that had marked the boundary of her world for so many years, her father took both her hands in his. "Listen to your heart," he said. "Trust in the thread. Remember that you carry with you all the love that has ever blessed you, and come back to me if you can." "I will," Layla promised. "I will come back, with the knowledge that will heal you. I swear it." He smiled, a smile of such gentleness and acceptance that it nearly broke her. "Don't swear what you cannot control. Only promise that you will try, and that if trying is not enough, you will forgive yourself, and know that I forgive you too." She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his hands. Then, before her courage could fail, she turned and walked out into the street, heading east toward the gate, toward the gathering caravan, toward the desert that waited beyond the city walls. She did not look back. She couldn't. If she saw her father standing at the door, watching her leave, she would lose the strength to continue. The streets were mostly empty at this hour. A few early risers were opening shops, a water seller was filling his containers at a public fountain, a group of beggars was stirring in the shelter of a mosque's doorway. Layla walked among them like a ghost, present but separate, already in some way departed even though the city still surrounded her. At the eastern gate, she found what she was seeking, a gathering of camels, horses, merchants, and travelers, the organized chaos that preceded any major caravan's departure. She stood at the edge of this activity, suddenly overwhelmed. How did one simply join a caravan? How did one find a specific person among this multitude? "You look lost, daughter." The voice belonged to an old woman sitting on a bundle of goods, her face so weathered and wrinkled that she might have been any age from 60 to 100. But her eyes were sharp, bright with intelligence, and what might have been humor. "I'm looking for Rashid al-Qadir," Layla said, "the caravan master." "Are you now?" The old woman studied her with unsettling intensity. "And what business does a city girl have with Rashid?" I was told he might grant me passage east, to the last wells, and perhaps beyond." The old woman's expression shifted, showing something between recognition and surprise. "Beyond the wells? Into the deep desert? That's a long journey for one who looks like she's never spent a night beyond her own walls. Nevertheless, it's the journey I must make." The old woman was silent for a moment, then suddenly laughed, a surprisingly bright sound, like water over stones. "Must? What a powerful word. Very well, come with me. I'll take you to Rashid, and we'll see what he makes of you." She stood with surprising agility and led Layla through the gathering caravan, weaving between camels and bales of goods with the ease of long practice. They stopped before a tall man of middle years, his face dark from sun and wind, his bearing that of someone accustomed to command. "Rashid," the old woman called, "I've brought you a passenger." The caravan master turned, his eyes immediately assessing, not unkind, but practical, measuring. "I take no passengers on a whim, grandmother. You know this." "Even those who carry the turquoise thread?" the old woman asked, gesturing to Layla's wrist. Rashid's expression changed immediately. He stepped closer, examining the thread wound around Layla's wrist, then looked at her face with new intensity. "Who gave you this?" "It came with a letter," Layla said, "from someone who said you owed them a debt and would honor it by granting me passage." "What name was in the letter?" "There was no name, only a symbol, a spiral within a circle. Rashid was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the caravan continued its preparations, but a small bubble of stillness seemed to surround the three of them. Finally, the caravan master nodded slowly. "I do know that symbol, and I do owe a debt." He studied Layla with what might have been sympathy. "The road to the last wells is hard but manageable, but you speak of going beyond, into the deep sands. Why?" "I seek knowledge," Layla said simply, "healing knowledge for my father." "And you believe this knowledge exists in the desert?" "I believe I must try to find it." Rashid exchanged a glance with the old woman, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then he sighed. "Very well. The debt will be honored. You may travel with us to the last wells. What happens after that is not in my hands. But I warn you, the desert is not kind to those who enter unprepared, in body or spirit." "I understand," Layla said, though she wasn't sure she did. "Do you?" Rashid's expression was serious. "The desert shows you things, your fears, your weaknesses, your deepest truths. Many who enter it discover they are not who they thought they were. Can you face that?" Layla thought of her father, of the promise she had made, of the thread on her wrist, and the letter that had begun all of this. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm willing to find out." Something in her answer seemed to satisfy him. "At least you're honest. That's more than many bring to the journey." He gestured to a young man nearby. "Karim, find a place for our guest. She travels with us." As the young man approached, Rashid added, "We leave within the hour. Once we're on the road, there's no turning back until we reach the wells. Are you certain?" Layla looked back toward the city, toward the life she was leaving behind. She thought of her father, of Omar, of the shop and the house and the fig tree. She thought of the safe, known future she was abandoning for a possibility that might be nothing more than a dream. Then she touched the thread on her wrist, felt its subtle warmth, remembered the letter's words and her own decision made under starlight. "I'm certain," she said. And so it was that as the sun crested the horizon, painting the world in gold and rose, the caravan of Rashid al-Qadir departed through the eastern gate, and among the merchants and pilgrims, the goods and animals, walked a young woman named Layla, carrying an oud and a thread and a hope that was perhaps foolish but was hers nonetheless. The city gates closed behind them, the road stretched ahead, and the real journey, the one that would test everything she thought she knew about herself and the world, had finally begun. Chapter 4. The Last Green Roads. The first days of travel passed in a rhythm that was entirely new to Layla. She had never been beyond the city walls for more than a few hours, never slept under open sky, never walked from sunup to well past midday in the company of strangers who would be her world for weeks to come. The land itself was still familiar, the region around her city, with its olive groves and wheat fields, its villages clustered around wells and springs, its gardens green with careful cultivation. But seeing it from the road, as a traveler rather than a resident, transformed it into something both known and foreign. She walked mostly in silence those first days, listening to the sounds of the caravan, the steady pad of camel feet, the creak of laden carts, the conversations of merchants discussing prices and routes, the occasional song from one of the camel drivers. The old woman who had first spoken to her at the gate, whose name she learned was Grandmother Zara, walked nearby, sometimes offering quiet commentary on what they passed. "That village there," Zara would say, pointing to a cluster of white buildings, "is famous for its pottery. The clay from the riverbed has particular qualities. My second husband came from there. He was a good man, died young. A fever took him, but he taught me to see the story in things, to read the history written in landscapes. Or, those ruins on the hill, very old, from before the current kingdoms. Sometimes when the wind is right, people say you can hear music from them. The music of what was, or perhaps of what might have been. Who can say? The past and the possible future, they're not as different as people think. Layla found these observations both soothing and unsettling. Zara seemed to speak in layers, her simple statements carrying undertones that suggested deeper meanings, connections to things Layla didn't quite understand but could sense, hovering just beyond her grasp. On the third evening, when the caravan made camp in a large grove of date palms beside a clear stream, Rashid, the caravan master, called Layla to his fire. Several others were gathered there, merchants, a scholar traveling to a distant library, a family of traders, and a young man about Layla's age who she had noticed watching her with curiosity over the past days. "We travel together," Rashid said when everyone was seated, "and so we should know something of one another. I do not ask for secrets, but understanding helps make the road shorter. So, introductions. We have a new traveler among us. Tell us, daughter, who you are and where you journey." All eyes turned to Layla. She felt her face flush, unaccustomed to being the center of attention, but she gathered her courage and spoke. "My name is Layla. I come from the city of Honey Walls, where my father is an instrument maker. I travel east seeking knowledge for healing. I go to the last wells, and perhaps beyond." "Beyond?" One of the merchants frowned. "Into the true desert? There's little beyond the wells but sand and death. And yet some have traveled there and returned," Layla said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Very few," the merchant countered, "and those who do return are often changed, touched by the sun or the visions that the desert brings. It's no journey for a young woman alone." "She won't be alone," Zara interjected calmly. "The desert is full of company for those who know how to perceive it." The merchant looked skeptical but said nothing more. Rashid nodded to the young man who had been watching Layla. "And you, Tariq? You've been silent about your purpose as well." The young man shifted, seeming almost embarrassed. He was handsome in a rough way, his skin tanned dark by sun, his hands calloused from work. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear. "I'm a musician," he said, "or trying to be. I travel to study with a master in the eastern cities, one who is said to understand the old modes, the music that our grandparents knew. I hope to learn from him before that knowledge is lost completely." Despite herself, Layla felt her interest spark. "What instrument do you play?" "The ney, primarily. Also some oud." His eyes brightened with enthusiasm. "Music it's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. My father wanted me to be a merchant like him, but I'm terrible at commerce. Numbers slip through my mind like water, but music I understand." "She carries an oud," Zara said, gesturing to the leather case Layla kept always close. "A very fine one, unless my eyes deceive me." All attention turned to the case. Layla felt suddenly protective of it, of her father's gift, but she also felt inexplicably that these people could be trusted, that the road had already begun to weave them together in ways that went beyond simple proximity. "My father made it," she said softly, "for my mother before I was born. He gave it to me before I left." "May we see it?" Tariq asked, and there was such genuine reverence in his voice that Layla found herself agreeing. She unwrapped the oud carefully, and even in the firelight, its beauty was evident. Tariq leaned forward, his eyes wide, and she saw in his face the same expression her father wore when examining a particularly fine instrument, a mixture of awe and hunger and deep appreciation. "May I?" he asked, hands hovering but not touching. Layla handed it to him, and he received it like a sacred object. His fingers moved over it gently, exploring its curves and joints, testing the strings lightly. Then, with a glance at her for permission, he began to play. The music that emerged was unlike anything Layla had heard in her father's shop or in the streets of her city. It was old music, haunting and strange, moving through modes that felt both foreign and somehow deeply familiar, as if they spoke to something in the blood rather than in the mind. Around the fire, conversation stilled. Even the sounds of the wider camp seemed to quiet. There was only Tariq's music, the oud's voice, her mother's oud, speaking for the first time in years, and the darkness beyond the firelight, listening. When he finished, silence held for a long moment. Then Rashid spoke, his voice rough with emotion. That was the old music, the kind that is rarely played anymore. Where did you learn it? From my grandfather, Tariq said, carefully handing the oud back to Layla. He learned it from his grandfather, who learned it from those who came before. It's music from the desert's edge, from the time when the boundaries between worlds were thinner, or so the stories say. The boundaries are always thin for those who know how to listen, Zara murmured. But few listen anymore. They talk too much, fill the silence with noise and busyness. Your grandfather taught you well, young musician. The evening continued, with others sharing stories and songs. But Layla's mind remained fixed on those moments when Tariq had played, when her mother's oud had finally voiced the song it had been waiting for. She thought of her father's words about her mother, about invisible music that existed eternally, waiting only for hands and hearts capable of giving it physical form. Perhaps that was what this journey was, not just a quest for healing knowledge, but a search for songs unsung, for truths unspoken, for the hidden patterns that her mother had seen and her father had loved without fully understanding. That night, in her bedroll under the stars, Layla held the turquoise thread and felt it pulse with what might have been warmth or might have been her own heartbeat. The boundaries between things, between thread and skin, between self and sky, between the journey made by her body and the journey made by her soul, seemed to blur and blend. She thought of her father, alone in their house with Fatima fussing over him. She sent her love across the distance, a thought like a prayer, like a song played on invisible strings. "I'm coming," she whispered to the night. "I'm seeking what you need. Wait for me, please wait." The stars made no answer, but their light was steady, ancient, patient. They had watched over countless journeys, countless seekers. They would watch over hers as well, bearing witness to whatever came. Chapter 5. The Last Well. The landscape changed gradually over the following days. The green grew sparser, the villages fewer and farther between. Gardens gave way to scrubland, lush fields to rocky soil where only the hardiest plants persisted. The air itself began to feel different, drier, carrying less of the rich vegetable smell of cultivation and more of dust and sun-baked stone. Layla noticed changes in herself as well. Her body, unused to such constant walking, had ached terribly the first days. But now it was adapting, finding a rhythm. Her skin had darkened from the sun. Her hands, always soft from shop work, were developing calluses. She was becoming, gradually, a creature of the road rather than of the city. More surprising were the internal changes. The constant worry about her father, which had consumed her in the city, had not disappeared but had shifted somehow. It was still there, a steady presence like her heartbeat, but it no longer dominated every thought. There was room now for other things, for observations of the changing land, for conversations with her fellow travelers, for the simple experience of being on a journey. She spent much time with Tariq, drawn by their shared connection to music and instruments. He taught her simple melodies on the ney, laughing kindly when she produced more breath than music. She told him stories of her father's workshop, of the musicians who had come and gone, of the instruments that had voices as distinct as human personalities. "Your father sounds like a master," Tariq said one afternoon as they walked side by side. The caravan was strung out along the road, groups clustering and separating in the natural flow of travel. "I hope I get to meet him someday. If I succeed," Layla said, then caught herself. "When I succeed, when I return with what he needs." Tariq glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Can I ask you something? What exactly are you seeking? You say knowledge for healing, but that's vague. Do you know what form this knowledge takes?" Layla realized she didn't have a clear answer. The letter had spoken of remedy and wisdom, of a city beyond the desert where certain knowledge was kept, but the details were frustratingly imprecise. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "I suppose I'll recognize it when I find it. Or perhaps whoever I'm meant to find will know." That's a lot of uncertainty to carry across a desert. "Yes," Layla agreed. "But what choice do I have? To stay home and watch my father fade, knowing I didn't try? That would be worse than any uncertainty." Tariq nodded slowly. "I understand. I think that's what journeys are. Choosing the uncertainty of seeking over the certainty of never knowing what might have been possible." His words stayed with Layla as the days passed. She found herself thinking about other journeys, other seekers in the stories her mother had told. Few of them had known exactly what they sought. They had followed signs, intuitions, threads both literal and metaphorical. They had trusted the journey itself to reveal its purpose. Could she do that? Could she trust enough to keep walking even into deepening uncertainty? On the morning of the 8th day, Rashid called the caravan to halt earlier than usual. They had reached the crest of a low hill, and before them the landscape changed dramatically. The scrubland fell away, replaced by something else entirely, the beginning of true desert, vast and golden, stretching to the horizon like a sea of sand frozen in waves and dunes. But between their current position and that endless expanse lay a remarkable sight, an oasis, green and lush, centered on what must be a powerful spring. And rising from the oasis's heart was the stone structure of a well, not a simple village well, but something monumental, ancient, built with craft and intention that spoke of an age when this place had been far more than a watering stop for caravans. "The last well," Rashid announced. "We'll make camp here for 2 days. Rest, resupply, prepare for those continuing east." His eyes found Layla. "This is the final outpost of the world you know. Beyond lies the true desert." As the caravan descended toward the oasis, Layla felt her heartbeat quicken. This was the place the letter had mentioned. Here she would leave Rashid's protection and seek passage with whoever might be willing to venture deeper into the sands. The oasis was larger than it had appeared from the hilltop, with numerous date palms, a small village of semi-permanent structures, and several areas clearly designed for caravan camps. The well itself was indeed ancient, its stones weathered smooth by centuries of hands drawing water, its depth such that dropping a pebble produced a long silence before the distant splash. While the others set up camp, Layla approached the well with Zara, who had said she wanted to make an offering to the spirits of the place. "It's an old custom," the grandmother explained, "probably older than the religions that now dominate these lands. Water is life, and where water springs from stone, there is mystery, there is power. Best to show respect." She produced a small carved token from her bag. Layla couldn't quite see what it depicted, and dropped it into the well. speaking words in a language Layla didn't recognize. Then she turned to Layla. You should make an offering too. You're about to ask much of the desert, best to approach with humility. I don't have anything prepared, Layla said. Give what you can. A coin, a kind thought, a promise. What matters is the intention, not the object. Layla thought for a moment, then unwound a length of the turquoise thread from her wrist. It hurt to do so. The thread had become precious to her, a tangible connection to the journey's purpose. But perhaps that was exactly why it made a proper offering. She held the thread over the well, feeling the cool air rising from the depths. For safe passage, she said softly. For wisdom to know the path. For strength to walk it. And for my father's healing, if such is possible. I offer this thread and my gratitude for any help I might receive. She released it, watching the turquoise strand spiral downward until the darkness swallowed it. For a moment, she felt a pang of loss, but then the remaining thread on her wrist seemed to warm, to pulse with approval or acknowledgement, and she felt confirmed in her choice. Well done, Zara said. Now, there's someone here you should meet. She led Layla to one of the permanent structures, a house built partially into the hillside, its front open to the oasis with a shaded porch where an old man sat working on something in his lap. As they approached, he looked up, and Layla saw that his eyes were clouded with cataracts, seeing imperfectly, if at all. Grandmother Zara, he greeted them, his voice surprisingly strong. I wondered if you'd bring her to me. You always know, Zara replied with obvious affection. Layla, this is Keeper Yusuf. He's tended this well for longer than anyone can remember. If anyone can advise you about the deep desert, it's him. Yusuf gestured for them to sit. As they did, Layla saw what he'd been working on. He was braiding rope with steady, practiced hands that compensated for failing eyes through long habit and touch. So, he said, those clouded eyes turning toward Layla with uncanny accuracy. You're the one with the turquoise thread, the one seeking the city beyond the sands. Layla startled. How did you— The well speaks, Yusuf said simply. Not in words, but in feelings. In knowledge that arrives without explanation. When you made your offering, it told me something of your purpose. He paused in his braiding. You seek healing for a parent. That's a worthy goal. But the desert cares little for our goals, worthy or not. It cares only for truth. Are you prepared for that? I don't know what that means, Layla admitted. It means the desert will strip away your illusions. About yourself, about your purpose, about what you think you know. It will show you things you've hidden even from yourself. Many cannot bear this. They turn back, or they break, or they lose themselves in the vastness. Others emerge transformed, carrying knowledge they could not have gained any other way. He resumed his braiding, his fingers moving with the certainty of long practice. There is a way forward from here, for those who are truly called. In 3 days, a small group will depart. Not a caravan like Rashid's, but a handful of desert people who know the hidden paths, who carry goods and knowledge to places most believe are only legend. They might take you if you can prove your sincerity. How do I prove that? Layla asked. Yusuf smiled, the expression that transformed his weathered face. You don't prove it to them. You prove it to yourself. Tonight, when the moon rises, go into the desert alone. Not far. Stay where you can still see our fires. But go beyond the sound of voices, beyond the comfort of company. Sit with yourself and with the beginning of the true sands. If you still want to continue after that, come back and tell me. I'll arrange the introduction. That's all? Just sit in the desert? Sitting with oneself is rarely just anything, Yusuf replied. But yes, That's all, though I suspect you'll find it more challenging than you expect. That evening, Layla ate her meal with the others but found herself distracted, her mind already moving toward the task Yusuf had set. Tariq noticed her preoccupation. "You're very quiet," he observed. "More than usual." She told him about Yusuf's challenge, expecting perhaps that he would think it strange or offer to accompany her, but instead he nodded with understanding. "My grandfather did something similar before he accepted me as a student. He sent me to sit alone in an olive grove for a whole night. No lamp, no company. Just me and the darkness and the trees." He smiled at the memory. "I thought it would be easy. It was the hardest night of my life." "What made it hard?" "My own mind," Tariq said simply. "All the thoughts I usually distracted myself from. All the fears and doubts and questions I kept buried under busyness and noise. They all rose up. There was nowhere to hide from them, nothing to do but face them. By dawn, I felt like I'd been in a battle, but I also felt cleaner somehow, more honest with myself." His words both reassured and unsettled Layla. She had not expected this test to be a physical challenge, but she hadn't quite grasped that it would be an internal one either. As the moon rose, nearly full, casting silvery light across the oasis and the sands beyond, Layla prepared herself. She brought only a blanket to sit on and the remaining turquoise thread on her wrist. No water, no food, no lamp. As Yusuf had instructed, this was about sitting with herself, not about surviving conditions. She walked past the last palm trees, past the final campfires, until the sounds of the caravan faded to a distant murmur. The sand beneath her feet was still warm from the day's sun, but cooling rapidly in the night air. She found a small rise, spread her blanket, and sat facing the vast darkness of the desert that stretched eastward. For the first few minutes it was almost peaceful. The moon was bright, the stars brilliant in a way they never were in the city. The air smelled clean, carrying hints of sage and sand. She could still see the glow of fires behind her, could still hear faintly the sound of someone singing. But as time passed and she continued to sit, stillness gave way to restlessness. Her body, unused to such motionless sitting, began to ache. Her mind, given no task to focus on, began to wander. At first, her thoughts were simple, observations about the landscape, memories of the day's travel, idle speculation about the mysterious guides Yusuf had mentioned. But gradually, as the night deepened and she remained sitting, other thoughts began to surface. Doubt came first, whispering in a voice that sounded suspiciously like her own practical side. "What are you doing here? This is madness. You've left your father alone, chasing a promise in a letter from someone you don't know. What if it's all a trick? What if there is no city, no remedy? What if you return to find him gone, and you wasted these precious final weeks wandering in deserts?" Layla tried to push these thoughts away, but they persisted, growing stronger. She found herself imagining her father dying alone, calling for her, wondering why his daughter had abandoned him. The images were vivid, painful, and they made her heart race with panic. She started to stand, to return to the camp, to forget this foolishness and go back with Rashid's caravan, back to the city, back to her father's side. But something stopped her. The memory of Tariq's words, perhaps, or Yusuf's challenge, or simply her own stubborn determination not to fail at even this simple test. She sat back down, trembling slightly. "These are just thoughts," she whispered to herself. "Not truth, just fears." But acknowledging them didn't make them disappear. If anything, sitting with them, not running from them, made them more intense. She felt tears beginning to flow, tears of fear, of grief for what she might lose, of uncertainty about whether she was brave or merely foolish. Why did I come? She asked herself in the darkness. Really, truly, why? The easy answer was, for her father's healing. But as she sat with the question, other answers began to surface, harder ones, more honest ones. She had come because she was restless in her old life, because some part of her had been waiting for an excuse to leave, to test herself, to discover who she might be beyond the safe boundaries of the known. She had come because her mother's mysterious journey had always haunted her, and she wanted to understand what might have called to her mother's heart. She had come because Omar's love, however genuine, had felt like a door closing, and she wasn't ready yet to be locked into one definition of herself. These revelations made her uncomfortable. They suggested that her motives were not as purely selfless as she had told herself, that she was not just a devoted daughter, but also a young woman hungry for something she couldn't quite name. Was that wrong? Was it selfish to want to seek her own path while also seeking her father's healing? The desert offered no answers, only endless space for the questions to echo. As the night deepened further, different thoughts began to arise, memories she had not examined in years, her mother's death, which she had experienced as such a small child. She had always told herself she didn't remember, that she was too young, but sitting here with nowhere to hide, she found that she did remember fragments, sensations, the feeling of her mother's hand letting go of hers, the confusion of suddenly being in her father's arms while her mother was carried away, the way the house had felt empty even though her father was still there. She had been angry at her mother for leaving. The realization struck her with unexpected force. A child's anger, irrational but real, that had been buried beneath years of idealization, of only remembering her mother through her father's loving stories and her own wish for a presence that could never return. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the night, to the memory of a mother she barely knew. "I'm sorry I was angry. I'm sorry I forgot to miss you. I'm sorry I'm not sure I know how to miss what I can barely remember." The tears came harder then, and Layla let them flow. This, she realized, was what the desert required. Not stoic endurance, but honest feeling, the willingness to face what lived inside her without armor or pretense. She cried for her mother, for her father, for herself. She cried for the life she was leaving behind and the uncertain future ahead. She cried until the tears ran dry and she sat empty, hollowed out, strangely light. In that emptiness, something shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled her. The doubt remained, but it was balanced now by something else, not certainty exactly, but a kind of acceptance. She didn't know what she would find. She didn't know if she would succeed. She didn't know if her motives were pure or mixed, selfless or selfish. But she knew, in a way that went deeper than thought, that she had to try. Not because it was guaranteed to work, not because she was completely ready, not because all her fears had been conquered, but simply because this was her path, her journey, her story to write or fail to write. The moon had traveled far across the sky. Layla realized she had been sitting for hours. Her body was stiff, cold, but her mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. She stood slowly, carefully, feeling somehow both exhausted and renewed. She rolled up her blanket and turned back toward the camp, toward the distant glow of dying fires. As she walked, she noticed something that made her pause. There in the sand ahead of her was a small depression, perhaps an animal's track, or simply a natural hollow. But in the moonlight, filled with shadow, it looked remarkably like the symbol from the letter, a spiral within a circle. Layla knelt beside it, touching the sand gently. Was it a sign, or just the human tendency to see patterns, to make meaning from randomness? She didn't know, and realized it didn't matter. The test hadn't been about receiving signs, It had been about facing herself, and that she had done. She stood and continued walking, and with each step she felt more certain. Not certain of success, but certain of choice. She had chosen this path. Whatever came of it, it was hers. When she reached the camp, she found that most people had retired to sleep, but a small fire still burned near Yusuf's dwelling. The old keeper sat beside it, wrapped in a blanket, as if he had been waiting. "So," he said as she approached, "you went, you sat, and you returned." "I did," Layla confirmed. And I still want to continue, more than before actually, because now I know it's not just about my father, though that's real and true. It's also about becoming who I'm meant to become, following the thread wherever it leads. Yusuf nodded slowly, his clouded eyes somehow seeing what was important. "Good. That's the answer of someone who might survive the deep desert. Not certainty, but honest intention. Not fearlessness, but courage that acknowledges fear." He reached into his robe and withdrew a small carved stone. "Take this to the morning camp on the eastern edge of the oasis, when the sun is one hand above the horizon. Show it to the woman in the red headscarf. Tell her Yusuf says you have sat with the sands and not fled. She'll decide whether to take you further." Layla accepted the stone. It was smooth, dark, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. The hard part is still ahead." But his smile was kind. "Sleep now. You've earned it." Layla found her bedroll and lay down, exhausted but unable to sleep immediately. Her mind was still processing the night's revelations, the emotions that had surged and settled. Around her, the camp was quiet except for the usual sounds: snoring, the shifting of sleeping bodies, the occasional snort of a camel. She touched the turquoise thread on her wrist, feeling its presence like a promise or a question, or perhaps both. Tomorrow she would take another step into uncertainty. But tonight, she had learned something valuable, that she could face her own darkness and not be destroyed by it, that she carried within herself both fear and courage, doubt and determination, and that these opposites could coexist without canceling each other out. As sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed of her mother, not as she had been in life, which Layla couldn't clearly remember, but as a presence, a warmth, a voice that said, "You're doing well, daughter. Keep walking. The thread knows the way even when you don't." Dikbrau, Chapter 6. Into the true sands morning came with the desert's particular clarity, the air cool and clean, the light sharp-edged, everything seeming to exist in perfect focus, as if the night had washed away some invisible film that usually dulled the world. Layla woke feeling the exhaustion of her vigil, but also a strange energy, as if she had shed some weight she hadn't known she was carrying. She ate a simple breakfast of dates and flat bread, packed her few belongings, and prepared to say her farewells. Rashid found her first. "Yusuf spoke to me this morning. He says you're continuing east with the desert people." "Yes," Layla confirmed, "if they'll have me." The caravan master studied her with an expression that mixed respect and concern. "I've fulfilled my debt by bringing you here. What happens next is beyond my responsibility. But I'll say this. The guides who travel the deep sands are strange folk. They live by old ways, old rules. They'll test you in ways you can't anticipate. Trust them, but also trust yourself. The desert respects both humility and strength." "I'll remember," Layla promised. "And this," Rashid continued, pressing something into her hand. It was a small compass, simple but well made. "Even in the deep sands, this will show you north. If you become lost, if you need to find your way back alone, it might save your life." Layla felt tears threaten at this unexpected kindness. "Thank you for everything," Rashid nodded once, then turned away, uncomfortable with emotion in the manner of practical men. But his gift spoke what his words didn't, that he cared what happened to her, that he hoped she would survive and return. Tariq was next, finding her as she was adjusting her pack. His face showed clear distress at the parting. "I wish I could go with you," he said. "But my master expects me, and I've already delayed too long. I need to continue with Rashid north and east to the cities." "You have your own journey," Layla said gently. "Your own music to learn. We can't walk each other's paths. But we might meet again?" There was hope in his voice, and something else. Something that suggested his feelings had developed beyond mere friendship over their days together. Layla felt a complicated knot of emotions. In another life, another story she could imagine. But no, that was not this journey's purpose. "Perhaps," she said, because it was kinder than certainty, "if the threads weave us together again." He pulled his ney from his pack. "Play your father's oud for me, one more time before we part." So there, in the early morning light with the oasis waking around them, Layla took out the precious instrument, and Tariq taught her a simple melody, just a few notes, a pattern she could remember and repeat. Their instruments spoke to each other, the ney's breathy voice and the oud's rich tones interweaving, creating something neither could make alone. When they finished, Tariq's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Remember that," he said. "Remember that separate voices can still harmonize. Maybe that's a kind of truth the desert needs to hear." They embraced briefly, and then he was gone, walking back toward Rashid's portion of the camp, and Layla felt a surprising grief at this parting. He had been her first friend on the road, had helped her feel less alone in the strangeness. But he was right. They each had their own music to find. Grandmother Zara came last, moving with her characteristic briskness despite her age. "So you're really doing it? Going into the deep sands with the desert people?" "Yes." "Good. You'll learn things there that can't be learned anywhere else." She paused, then reached up and touched Layla's cheek with a weathered hand. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago. She was a seeker too, always looking for the next horizon. She found what she sought, but it cost her much. I hope you find your answers at a kinder price." "Who was she?" Layla asked, but Zara just smiled mysteriously. "A story for another time, perhaps, if we meet again. Now go. The sun is reaching the proper height. The woman in the red headscarf doesn't like to be kept waiting." Layla shouldered her pack, secured the oud case, and made her way through the oasis to its eastern edge. Here, where the green ended and the true desert began, she found a small camp, just 3 tents of dark fabric, nearly invisible against the sand, and a handful of people moving about with quiet efficiency. She spotted the woman in the red headscarf immediately. She was neither old nor young, perhaps 40, perhaps 60, the desert making age difficult to judge. Her skin was the deep brown of those who lived always under the sun, her eyes dark and measuring, her bearing that of someone accustomed to command and respect. Layla approached carefully, aware that she was the outsider here, the one asking for favor. When she was close enough to speak without shouting, she stopped and waited to be acknowledged. The woman finished whatever she was doing, checking the packing of a camel, it appeared, then turned her full attention to Layla. "You're the city girl Yusuf mentioned." "I am. My name is Layla. He said to give you this." She held out the carved stone. The woman took it, examined it, then tucked it into her robes. "I'm called Amira. I lead this group. We travel paths most don't know exist, carrying goods and knowledge to places that don't appear on maps. It's dangerous work, hard work. Why would we burden ourselves with someone who knows nothing of the deep desert? It was a direct challenge, and Layla appreciated the honesty. Because Yusuf said, "I've sat with the sands and not fled. Because I carry something that might matter, a thread and a purpose. And because—" She paused, then spoke from the truth she'd learned in the night's vigil. "Because I'm willing to learn, to serve, to carry my share and more if needed. I don't ask for charity, only for passage and the chance to prove I can walk this path." Amira studied her for a long moment, those dark eyes seeming to look past Layla's words to the intention beneath them. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Yusuf's recommendation carries weight, and there's something about you." She gestured to the thread on Layla's wrist. "That mark is known to us. It's old work from hands that understood the weaving of more than just fiber. So, we'll take you on trial. You'll walk like the rest of us, carry what you're given to carry, obey instructions without question or delay. If you prove unable or unwilling, we'll leave you at the next viable location. Understood?" "Understood," Layla agreed, her heart beating fast with a mixture of fear and excitement. "We leave in 1 hour. Be ready." The hour passed quickly. Layla watched as Amira's group, which consisted of 5 people in total, including Amira, completed their preparations with practiced efficiency. There were no pack animals except for 3 camels, and these were loaded lightly, carrying only water, some food, and mysterious bundles wrapped in cloth. One of the other travelers, a young man with scarification patterns on his cheeks, showed Layla how to wrap her headscarf to protect against sun and blowing sand. Another, an older woman with silver-streaked hair, gave her a pair of well-worn sandals better suited for sand walking than her own shoes. "You'll need to walk soft," the woman said. "The sand shifts, and you must shift with it. Fight it, and you'll exhaust yourself. Move with it, and you'll find you can walk all day." As the sun climbed higher, Amira called them together. She stood facing east, toward the vast expanse of desert that shimmered in the heat like a living thing. "We walk the hidden paths," she said, her voice carrying a ritual quality. "We carry what must be carried. We go where we must go. May the desert grant us passage and return us whole." The others murmured agreement, and then, without further ceremony, they began walking. Simply walking, leaving the green oasis behind, stepping out onto the sand that stretched endlessly ahead. Layla took a deep breath, adjusted her pack, and followed. Behind her, the last well, Rashid's caravan, the green trees, everything familiar was falling away. Ahead was only sand and sky and the unknown distance. The walking was harder than she expected. The sand that looked so solid from a distance gave way beneath her feet, requiring constant adjustment of balance and stride. The sun, even though it was still morning, beat down with an intensity she'd never experienced in the city's shaded streets, but she kept walking, finding a rhythm, letting her body learn what her mind didn't know. The woman who had given her sandals walked beside her for a while, offering quiet instruction. "Shorter steps. Feel the sand before you trust it. Watch where Amira walks. She knows where the sand is firmer." As the hours passed and the oasis disappeared behind them, swallowed by the dunes, Layla felt something shift inside her. This was the point of no return. Even if she wanted to go back, she couldn't. Not alone, not without guides, not without water or knowledge of the path. She was committed now, completely. The only way forward was forward. That realization, which might have terrified her days ago, brought instead a strange peace. No more doubts, no more second-guessing. She was on the path. All she could do was walk it. The day progressed in a rhythm of walking, brief rests, walking again. The landscape seemed unchanging, sand and more sand, dunes rising and falling like frozen waves. But Amira moved with clear purpose, following markers Layla couldn't perceive, a certain pattern in the ripples, perhaps, or the angle of the sun, or something else entirely. As the sun began its descent, painting the sand in shades of gold and rose, Amira called a halt. "We camp here tonight. Tomorrow we reach the first of the old stones, and after that, the paths become stranger. Rest well. You'll need your strength." The group made camp efficiently, tents erected, fire built, water carefully portioned out. Layla helped where she could, earning nods of approval when she didn't need to be told twice, and worked without complaint despite her obvious exhaustion. That night, sitting around the small fire that seemed like the only light in an ocean of darkness, Amira spoke to the group. "We carry a new traveler. She seeks the city beyond the stones, knowledge for healing. This is an old purpose, an honored one. We'll help her as far as our path coincides with hers." One of the men, lean and weather-worn, with eyes that reflected the firelight like a cat's, spoke up. "The city beyond the stones. I haven't heard anyone speak of seeking it in years. I thought that path had closed." "No path is ever truly closed," Amira said. "Only waiting for the one who needs to walk it. The turquoise thread suggests she's been called. We'll see if she's been chosen." "What's the difference?" Layla asked. "Called means the invitation was issued," Amira explained. "Chosen means you're capable of accepting it. Many are called, few are chosen. The difference is discovered in the walking." Layla thought about this as the night deepened. She had been called. The letter was proof of that. But was she chosen? Would she prove capable? Or would she fail? Would the desert find her wanting? Would she return empty-handed if she returned at all? These questions had no answers yet, so she let them drift away and focused instead on the immediate, the warmth of the fire, the taste of the simple meal, the strange comfort of being with people who knew these lands, who moved through them with respect and understanding. Above, the stars were more brilliant than she had ever seen them. Constellations she knew from the city were here joined by countless others, revealed now that she was far from any other light. The Milky Way spread across the sky like a river of distant fires, and Layla felt suddenly small, a tiny point of consciousness beneath that vastness. But strangely, feeling small didn't feel frightening. Instead, it felt appropriate, honest. She was small, her concerns were small, and yet she was here, walking this enormous landscape, carrying her small hopes and fears and determinations. Maybe that was enough. Maybe being small but persistent, limited but brave, was its own kind of power. "You're thinking loud thoughts," the silver-haired woman said, settling beside Layla. "I can almost hear them echoing." Layla smiled. "Just trying to understand where I am, who I am in this place. That's good thinking. The desert demands that kind of honesty. Pretense dies quickly here. There's nowhere to hide it. No audience to perform for except the sand and sky, and they don't care about our masks." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "My name is Salima. I've walked these sands for 30 years. If you have questions, you can ask me." "Thank you," Layla said, grateful for this offer of guidance. "Can I ask, the city I seek, the one beyond the stones, have you been there?" Salima's expression grew distant, as if looking at something far away or long ago. "Once, in my youth, I was seeking something too. Not healing for another, but understanding for myself. I had dreams, visions that troubled me, and I needed to know if they meant something or if I was simply touched by sun madness." "And did you find out?" "Yes. The people there, the knowledge keepers, they showed me that my visions were real, were meaningful, were a gift rather than a curse. They taught me to understand them, to work with them rather than fear them. That's why I now travel with Amira. These paths require guides who can see more than the visible. What kind of visions? Layla asked, then immediately worried she'd been too bold. I'm sorry. You don't have to answer. No, it's all right. Salima smiled. I see the paths that water takes beneath the sand. I feel where the ancient wells are hidden, where storms will strike before they form, where the sand itself holds memories of what came before. It's not magic, exactly. More like a different kind of sensing, the way some people can smell rain coming or feel earthquakes before they strike. Layla absorbed this, her understanding of the world expanding yet again. Is everyone in your group like this, with special abilities? In our own ways, yes. Amira can read the stars like you read words on a page. They tell her stories, histories, futures. Malik, she gestured to the cat-eyed man, can speak with the desert creatures, understand their warnings and wisdom. Hassan, the young one, he hears the music in the wind, knows when the dunes will sing and what they're trying to say. We're a strange lot by city standards, but out here, we're what's needed. And me? Layla asked. I don't have any abilities like that. I'm just ordinary. Salima regarded her thoughtfully. You bear the turquoise thread. That's not given to the ordinary. You may not know yet what your gift is, but the desert will reveal it if you're patient. Or perhaps your gift is simpler, the ability to love deeply, to persist despite fear, to walk toward hope even when certainty is absent. Those are rare abilities, even if they don't seem magical. These words settled into Layla's heart like seeds planted in good soil. Maybe she didn't need to be special in obvious ways. Maybe just being who she was, with all her doubts and fears and stubborn love, was enough. The group settled into sleep gradually. Salima showed Layla how to arrange her blanket to stay warm despite the desert's night cold. Malik took the first watch, sitting at the camp's edge with a staff across his knees, his eyes scanning the darkness for dangers Layla couldn't imagine. As Layla drifted toward sleep, wrapped in her blanket under the infinite stars, she thought of her father. Was he looking at these same stars from his courtyard? Could he somehow feel her presence, her love, traveling across the distance? I'm still coming, she whispered to the night. I'm walking the path. Wait for me, Father. Believe in me. I'll find what we need. The stars made no answer, but their ancient light continued its eternal vigil, bearing witness to countless seekers across countless nights, each carrying their own small hopes into vast uncertainties. And tomorrow, Amira had said, they would reach the old stones, and the paths would become stranger still. Layla let sleep take her. Her last conscious thought, a strange mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. She was deeper into the unknown than ever before. And somehow, impossibly, that felt right, as if each step away from the familiar was a step toward some essential truth she had been seeking all her life without knowing it. Chapter 7. Voices of the Caravan. The second day in the deep desert began before dawn, when stars still blazed overhead with ancient fire. Amira's soft call woke the camp, and within minutes everyone moved with practiced efficiency. Tents folded, fire extinguished, all traces of their presence erased as if they had been nothing more than wind passing through. We leave no mark, Salima explained to Layla as they worked. The desert remembers, but we do not force our memory upon it. We pass through like water, present, but not permanent. They walked as dawn broke, and Layla witnessed the transformation she would remember forever. How first light touched the dunes, turning them from gray shadows to rose to gold. The change happened gradually yet completely, like watching creation itself, the world born fresh with each sunrise. Walking was easier today. Her body was adapting, finding rhythm. She still tired, still felt the pack's weight and sun's heat, but these were manageable now, part of the experience rather than obstacles threatening to defeat her. Hassan fell into step beside her as morning progressed. "You're doing well. Many city people struggle more on their second day. The newness wears off and reality of distance sets in. But you seem settled." "I think I am," Layla said, surprised to find it true. "Yesterday I was fighting everything. The sand, heat, my own fear. Today I'm just walking." Hassan nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. The desert teaches this first, that struggling against what is uses more energy than accepting and adapting. My grandmother used to say, the desert is the best teacher because it shows you immediately the cost of your choices." As the sun climbed higher, landscape began to change. Smooth dunes gave way to harder ground studded with rocks. These weren't ordinary rocks. They were worked stone, carved, deliberately placed. Some stood alone like sentinels, others clustered in patterns suggesting purpose, meaning, design. "The old stones," Amira announced, stopping before a particularly large one twice the height of a person. Its surface was covered in symbols worn smooth by wind and time but still visible, spirals and circles, geometric patterns, images that might have been stars or flowers or something else entirely. "Who made them?" Layla asked. "The people who were here before," Malik said, approaching the stone and placing his palm against it reverently. "Thousands of years ago, when this desert was different, greener, wetter. They left these markers, these messages. Some we can read, others speak in languages we've forgotten. They mark the paths," Amira explained. "Not physical paths, those shift with dunes, but deeper paths, true paths, roots of power and meaning that don't change even when surface world does. Those who can read them can find their way to places that don't appear on ordinary maps." Layla moved toward a medium-sized stone that seemed to call to her. She placed her palm against it as Malik had done. At first, nothing, just warm stone, slightly rough under her hand. But as she stood there, breathing, trying to be open, she felt something. Not a voice exactly, more like vibration, a feeling that rose through her arm into her chest. It spoke of depth, of circles returning to themselves, of journeys that ended where they began but at different level. "It's showing you the spiral path," Salima said, appearing beside her. "See how the carving moves inward and outward simultaneously? That's the nature of true journeys. We go out into world, but we're also going inward into ourselves. The destination we seek is both far away and right here, within us, waiting to be discovered." That evening among the stones, after their simple meal, Amira spoke of the path ahead. "Tomorrow we enter the section of desert that most avoid. The sand there moves in patterns that confuse ordinary navigation. There are places where water seems to be but isn't, where sun appears in two positions at once, where sound carries strangely or not at all. These are not dangers in usual sense. The desert is not trying to harm you, but it reveals things, shows you truths about yourself that you may not be ready to see." "Have you lost travelers there?" Layla asked. "Not lost, no, but some find they cannot continue, that what the desert shows them is too much to bear. We bring them back, help them return to the wells, honor their attempt. There's no shame in it. The desert respects knowing of one's limits as much as it respects pushing beyond them." That night, Layla found sleep difficult. She rose quietly and walked to sit against one of the stones. The night was clear and cold, stars so numerous they formed solid river of light across sky. Touching the turquoise thread on her wrist, She thought about all the threads that had brought her here. "Mother," she whispered, "if you can hear me, if you walked paths like this, help me understand what I'm meant to learn." The wind rose, gentle but definite, carrying scent she couldn't identify, something that made her think of old places, ancient knowledge, time folding back on itself. And in that wind, she thought she heard, or felt, a response. Not words, but sense of encouragement, of being seen and supported by something larger than herself. Chapter 8. The Oasis That Listens. The terrain changed dramatically on third day. Stones gave way to section of desert that seemed to shimmer and shift even when Layla stood still. Dunes here were smaller but more numerous, their surfaces marked with patterns that looked almost deliberate. "Stay close," Amira instructed. "This section likes to confuse, to separate travelers from companions. It's not malicious, but it's testing, always testing." They moved in tight group. Layla found that if she looked too long at horizon, it seemed to waver and multiply, showing several possible distances at once. The sun, though clearly overhead, sometimes appeared to have ghost image at different angles. "Don't trust your eyes completely here," Salima advised. "Trust your feet, your body's sense of earth beneath you, and trust the thread on your wrist. Such markers hold true even when perception falters." Hours passed in this strange landscape. Around midday, Layla first heard it, or thought she heard it. A voice, faint but distinct, calling her name. She looked around, but all companions were silent, focused on walking. She decided she'd imagined it. But then it came again. Layla, drawn out, almost singing. And this time she could tell it was coming from somewhere to her left, beyond rise of sand. She turned her head to look, and Salima immediately gripped her arm. "What do you hear?" "A voice, calling my name." "Don't follow it. Don't even look toward it for too long. The desert is speaking to you, showing you something. But this isn't the time to engage. Later, when we camp, if it's still calling, you can sit with it safely." Layla did as instructed, thanking the voice for speaking and continuing with the group. The calling stopped, and she felt curious sense of respect, as if something had indeed heard her acknowledgement and was content to wait. As sun began descent and air cooled slightly, landscape opened suddenly into something unexpected. An oasis, but unlike one at last well. This was smaller, wilder, more ancient feeling. Water pooled in natural rock basins surrounded by a handful of hardy palms that looked centuries old, their trunks twisted and weathered, but their fronds still green. "The listening oasis," Amira announced with reverence. "We'll camp here tonight and tomorrow. This is sacred place, true place. The water is sweet and spirits benevolent. Here, barriers between inner and outer are thin. What has been calling to you throughout day can be engaged with safely." Each person approached water with ritual respect, touching it with specific gestures, speaking words in languages Layla didn't understand. When her turn came, Salima showed her proper way. Touch water with 3 fingers, index, middle, and ring finger of your right hand. Then bring those fingers to your forehead, then to your heart, then to your lips. As you do, speak. "I drink with gratitude. I honor the gift. I carry your blessing forward." Layla followed instructions. As her fingers touched water, she felt shock of recognition, not physical, but emotional. The water was alive, aware, welcoming. She drank, and the water was indeed sweet, with mineral clarity that felt cleansing, restorative. It settled into her like peace. That evening, after simple meal, Amira spoke to Layla directly. "You heard voice today. It's been calling you, yes?" "Yes, I can still hear it actually. fainter now but still present. The Oasis provides space where you can answer that call safely. We'll keep watch. You can go to water's edge, open yourself to whatever wants to speak, engage with it fully. The Oasis won't let you be lost or harmed, but it will show you truth. Are you ready? Layla's heart rate increased. I'll try. That's enough. Trying is always enough. As darkness settled and stars emerged, Layla made her way to water's edge. The pool was perfectly still, reflecting stars with such clarity it created illusion of infinite depth. She sat on smooth rock, arranged herself comfortably, and opened her awareness to whatever wanted to speak. The voice came immediately, stronger now, clearer. Layla. She recognized it, or thought she recognized it. It sounded like her mother, or what she imagined her mother must have sounded like. I'm listening, Layla said aloud, her voice shaking slightly. Why do you come? Tell me truly, not story you tell others, but truth you barely admit to yourself. Layla felt resistance rise, but the Oasis demanded honesty. I come because I'm afraid of losing my father, afraid of being alone, afraid of disappointing everyone, afraid of living small life, afraid of dying without testing myself, without knowing what I'm capable of beyond safe and known. And, the voice prompted, I come because I'm angry at time for taking everything, angry at my mother for dying and leaving me, angry at my father for aging, becoming fragile, angry at myself for not being enough, for not being able to stop any of it. The admissions poured out, all feelings she had pushed down, ignored, denied, the resentment alongside love, the selfishness alongside devotion, the doubt alongside hope. Yes, the voice said, and now it sounded less like her mother and more like herself, her own voice, but deeper, wiser. Yes, these are truths, the complicated, human, real truths. Can you hold them? Can you be angry and loving, afraid and brave, selfish and devoted? Can you be all these things at once and still be worthy? I don't know, Layla sobbed. By practice, by acknowledging that human hearts are vast enough to contain opposites, by releasing need to be simple, uncomplicated, easily categorized. You are complex because life is complex. You contain multitudes because reality contains multitudes. This is not failure. This is honesty. This is being fully human. Layla wept then, deep, shaking sobs from her core. She wept for her mother, for her father, for herself. She wept for impossible expectations she'd been carrying, for all ways she'd tried to be perfect instead of real. And as she wept, she felt Oasis holding her, not physically, but energetically, spiritually, with compassion that had no words, but was absolute in its acceptance. The water, palms, ancient stones, very air, all seemed to breathe with her, to witness her grief, to honor it without trying to fix or diminish it. When tears finally subsided, Layla felt hollowed out but paradoxically fuller, as if making room for grief had also made room for something else, not joy exactly, but kind of peace. What do I do now? She asked. You continue, you walk forward, you carry both hope and acceptance. Hope that you might find what your father needs, acceptance that outcomes aren't entirely in your control. You love him fully, without letting that love become prison of impossible expectations. You honor your mother by living your own life. You become yourself, which is only real task any of us have. And if I fail? Then you will have walked path anyway. You will have become who you needed to become in walking. And that is never failure, even when it doesn't achieve what you initially sought. The voice began to fade. Before it disappeared, it spoke once more. Look! Layla turned where voice indicated, and there, across water, visible through palms, She saw something that made her breath catch. A glow on horizon, faint but distinct. Not sunlight. Sun had set hours ago, but light nonetheless, suggesting structures, habitation, place where people lived and kept lamps burning against night. The city beyond the stones, the voice whispered, barely audible. You're close, closer than you know. The final path will reveal itself soon. Shas chapter 9. The night of trials. Next morning, Amira gathered them with serious expression. Today we walk to threshold. By evening we'll reach place where individual trials must be faced. She turned to Layla directly. Before city beyond stones reveals itself fully, there is passage. We call it night of trials. It's not test with right or wrong answers. It's revealing, time when desert strips away everything superficial and shows you your deepest self, your fears, shadows, hidden motivations, but also your strength, capacity for truth, essential nature beneath all roles and masks. She paused. You must face this alone. We cannot accompany you, cannot guide you through it. We'll set up camp at threshold, and at moonrise you'll walk forward into trial ground. If you're meant to reach city, if your heart is properly prepared, you'll return to us by dawn. They walked throughout morning and into afternoon, moving through landscape that shifted constantly. As sun began descent, they emerged into natural amphitheater. Rock walls rose on 3 sides, creating shelter and enclosure, while 4th side opened onto vast plain of sand and stone, stretching toward horizon. Here, Amira said, we camp here, and from here you'll walk forward when moon rises. As they worked, each person approached Layla with gifts. Sulaima pressed small water skin into her hands. This holds water from listening Oasis. When thirst comes, not physical perhaps, but in other ways, drink from this. It will help you remember who you are. Malik offered feather from Desert Hawk. It represents ability to rise above confusion, to see from higher perspective. Hassan taught her simple song, 3 notes repeated. This is centering song. If fear becomes overwhelming, sing this. Let it be anchor, way back to your center. Jamila gave small piece of cloth covered in intricate patterns. These are patterns of protection and clarity. Keep this with you. Amira offered silver charm on leather cord. This has been with me through many trials. I loan it to you now, and you'll return it when we meet again. As moon rose, Amira spoke final words. Walk until you can no longer hear our camp, until you're truly alone with desert and yourself. Then wait. Trials will come to you. Face what arises with as much honesty as you can bear. Layla began walking. Behind her, she heard group begin low chant that followed her before gradually fading as she moved farther from camp. When she had walked perhaps 1,000 steps and camp was no longer visible, she stopped. She found small rise that felt right and sat, arranging herself cross-legged. At first, nothing happened. Night was peaceful, beautiful, but gradually, quality of night began to change. Shadows seemed to deepen, to take on weight and substance. Breeze became more insistent, carrying whispers, voices at edge of hearing. Then they came, figures emerging from darkness. The first wore her father's face, but twisted, bitter. You abandoned me, it said. I needed you, and you chose adventure over duty. Now I die alone while you chase fantasies. Layla's heart clenched, but she remembered to listen beneath noise, to find quiet truth under loud lies. You're not my father. You're my fear, my guilt, and I acknowledge you. You're real, but you're not complete truth. My father blessed this journey. I honor him by walking this path, not by cowering at home in helpless grief. The figure wavered but didn't disappear. It changed, became more insistent. You're lying to yourself. You came for yourself, not for me. You wanted escape, adventure. My illness was just excuse. Yes, Layla said, admission costing her. Yes, I came partly for myself, to escape, to test myself, to discover who I am beyond safe and known. But that doesn't make my love less real. I can have complex motivations and still genuinely seek my father's healing. I can be both selfish and devoted. I contain contradictions because I'm human. Figure dissolved, but immediately another took its place, this one wearing Omar's face. You used me. You let me love you knowing you would leave, knowing you didn't love me back. Layla felt sharp pain of this accusation. Yes, I did, though not with conscious intention to hurt. I was confused, cowardly about my own feelings. I'm sorry, you deserved better than my uncertainty. But I can't give you something I don't have. I can't force love through will or guilt. This figure faded more slowly, reluctantly. Before it disappeared, it spoke once more. I hope you find what you're seeking. So do I, Layla said softly. But trials weren't finished. Third figure emerged, hardest yet. It wore her mother's face, beautiful and perfect, and its expression was one of profound disappointment. You're not like me, it said coldly. You're weak, uncertain, ordinary. You carry my oud, but you'll never make music I could make. You walk my paths, but you'll never understand what I understood. You're pale copy, failure of inheritance. This cut to very core, sense that she could never measure up to mother she'd never known, could never equal gifts she'd never witnessed, could never be worthy of love that existed only in memory and idealization. But then something shifted. Something broke open, and from that breaking came voice she'd never quite heard before. Her own voice, finally fully owned. No, Layla said, and word rang with unexpected power. No, I'm not you. I never will be. I'm me. Layla, daughter of Hamza, and yes, daughter of you too, but my own person with my own path, my own gifts, my own way of being in world. I don't need to be you. I don't need to equal your gifts or walk your exact roads. I need only to be fully, completely, honestly myself. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Mother figure transformed then, no longer cold or disappointed, but warm, proud, reaching toward Layla with love rather than judgment. Yes, it said, voice now gentle. True. That's the lesson. That's what I hoped you would learn. Be yourself, beloved daughter. That's all any of us can do. That's only real magic. Figure dissolved, and Layla found herself alone again on moonlit plain. More figures emerged. Her own self at different ages, showing fears, failures, moments of shame or cowardice or smallness. Each one she faced, acknowledged, spoke truth to, until she was exhausted from relentless honesty. Finally, one last figure appeared. This one had no face, no clear form. It was shadow and possibility, question and potential. Who are you? Layla asked. I am what you might become if you continue forward. If you reach city and receive what's waiting there. If you return home transformed by this journey. I am version of you that lives on other side of now. What can you tell me? That you're ready, that you've done work of preparing, of opening, of becoming honest enough to receive what city offers, that your father will be proud regardless of outcomes, that you carry in you everything you need for whatever comes next. Will he live? Will remedy work? I can't tell you that. Future is not fixed, and healing takes many forms. But I can tell you this. You will return to him truer daughter, and your presence, your full, honest, courageous presence, will be its own kind of medicine, regardless of what other remedies you carry. Figure began to fade. Before it disappeared, it spoke once more. Look. Layla turned where figure pointed, and there in distance, barely visible in starlight, she saw structures, walls, and towers, suggesting city, or dream of city, or possibility of city that existed in spaces between visible and invisible. The city beyond stones, she whispered. Walk toward that light at dawn. You'll arrive when you're meant to arrive. Then it was gone. Layla was alone with night, stars, and distant suggestion of her destination. She felt hollowed out, exhausted, but also cleaner, lighter, more herself than ever. She unwrapped her father's oud and tried to play melody Tariq had taught her. Notes came out rough, imperfect, but sincere. I'm here, she sang softly. I'm walking, I'm becoming. Wait for me, Father, I'm coming home. Moon set, stars wheeled overhead, and Layla sat playing her imperfect music until eastern sky began to lighten with approach of dawn. Chapter 10. The City at the Edge of Understanding. Dawn broke gradually, painting world in shades of rose and gold. As light grew, distant structures became clearer. They were real, solid, buildings that seemed to grow from rock itself rather than being built upon it, their architecture unlike anything she'd seen. She stood and began walking toward city. Distance was deceptive. What looked like hours' walk took most of morning, but Layla didn't mind. She needed this time to transition, to prepare. As she drew closer, she saw city, if it could be called city, was small, perhaps housing few hundred people. Its buildings were built into and around massive rock formations, with gardens carved into unlikely places, water channeled through ancient stone conduits. It was beautiful in stark, functional way. At city's entrance, old woman sat on stone bench, weaving. You're one with turquoise thread, woman said without looking up. We've been expecting you. Layla stopped, surprised. Expecting me? How? Now woman looked up, her eyes holding depth and kindness. Letter was sent. You followed its call, and thread you carry was woven here. When such threads go out into world, we feel them, follow their journey, know when they're bringing someone home. Home? But I've never been here. Haven't you? In dreams, perhaps, in longings, in that part of your heart that always knew there was something more, somewhere beyond ordinary world where deeper truths lived. She sat down weaving and stood. Come, I'll take you to one you seek, but Layla, he will not give you what you think you want. What he offers is always what is needed, but rarely what is expected. Can you accept that? Layla thought of her night of trials, of all she'd learned. I can try. That's all any of us can do. Old woman led Layla through narrow streets, past gardens where impossible plants grew, past courtyards where people sat in quiet contemplation. They climbed stairs carved into rock, winding upward to dwelling built into highest part of formation. He's inside, waiting for you, woman said, gesturing to bench beside door. I'll be here when you emerge, however long it takes. Layla took deep breath and stepped inside. Interior was simple, single room with few cushions, shelves holding scrolls and bound volumes, small table with writing implements, and sitting at table was man of indeterminate age, might have been 50 or 80. His face was lined but eyes bright, presence radiating calm that seemed to slow time itself. Layla, he greeted her. Daughter of Hamza, carrier of turquoise thread, walker of spiral path. Welcome. Please, sit, she said, keeping Awad case close. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, and Layla had strange sense of being truly seen, not just surface, but depths, struggles, growth, everything she'd experienced and become. You sent letter, she finally said. I did. Your father and I knew each other long ago. We walked some roads together, he and I and your mother. We were young, seeking, full of questions. Your mother was one with true sight, true vision. When she became ill, when we knew her time was short, She made me promise something, that if her daughter ever needed guidance, ever needed thread to follow into deeper truths, I would provide it. Layla felt tears welling. She knew, even then. She hoped. She saw possibility. Your mother understood that healing comes in many forms, and sometimes greatest healing is journey itself, rather than any remedy found at its end. He paused. You came seeking something to heal your father, and I will give you something to take back to him. But Layla, you must understand, what I offer will ease his passage, not prevent it. It will help him find peace, release pain. Let him go gently when his time comes, but it will not cure him, will not restore his youth, will not stop what has already begun. Words landed like stones in still water. This was answer she'd traveled so far to receive, and it was not answer she'd hoped for. Then I failed, she whispered. No, Man said firmly. You succeeded. You walked path that transformed you, that prepared you to be daughter your father needs in his final time. You learned to hold both hope and acceptance, both love and letting go. And you'll bring him something precious, not cure, but blessing. Your presence, your growth, your courage, these are medicines beyond what any remedy can provide. But he'll still die. Yes, as we all will. Death is not failure. It's transition, doorway, return to source from which we came. What matters is how we approach it, how we honor life that was lived, how we love through letting go. Layla sat with this, feeling it settle into understanding. It hurt, but somewhere beneath pain was recognition. She had known this, really. What do you offer, then? Man stood and went to shelf. He returned with small carved box. This contains essence, herbs and tinctures and other things, prepared with intention and knowledge. When your father's pain becomes too much, when he's ready to release his hold on this life, single drop on tongue will bring peace. No struggle, no suffering, just gentle letting go, as easy as falling asleep. He placed box in her hands, and this, he produced scroll, sealed with wax, contains teachings for you, about nature of love and loss, about patterns that connect all things, about your own gifts which are just beginning to wake. When you're ready, when grief has softened enough to allow learning, open this and read. What gifts? I don't have any special abilities. Don't you? You hear music beneath words, feel threads that connect people and possibilities, sense patterns trying to emerge into being. These are subtle gifts, easy to dismiss, but they're real, and they can be developed. Your mother had them. You inherited them, along with her courage and capacity for love beyond fear. He touched turquoise thread on her wrist. This thread was your mother's. She wore it on her own journey. Now it's yours, and it will continue guiding you, not toward destinations, but toward your own becoming, which is only true destination any of us ever has. Chapter 11. The Return Journey. Layla spent 3 days in City Beyond Stones, days of rest and learning, of being held by community that understood complexity of what she was carrying. Old woman who'd greeted her, whose name was Rashida, became her guide, showing her gardens where medicinal plants grew, explaining principles behind remedy prepared for her father. Death is not enemy, Rashida said as they sat among herb gardens. Fear of death is enemy. Denial of death's reality is enemy. But death itself? It's as natural as birth, as essential to pattern as beginning is. When we try to prevent it at all costs, we sometimes create suffering rather than preventing it. But how do I let him go? You don't choose loss, you choose love. And sometimes love means allowing someone's suffering to end, even though your own suffering of grief, is just beginning. It's sacrifice, but it's also profound act of care. These conversations settled something in Layla, prepared her for what waited at journey's end. On final evening, man whose name was Khalil invited her to share meal. Over simple food, he spoke of her mother. She was remarkable, not because she was perfect, she wasn't, but she had capacity to keep opening, to keep choosing growth even when uncomfortable. She taught me that courage isn't absence of fear, but willingness to act despite it. Did she love my father? Truly? Oh yes, with everything she had. That's why she walked her own journey first. Not because she doubted him, but because she wanted to be whole, to understand herself before binding her life to his. She believed best gift we give those we love is our own becoming, our own truth. After meal, Khalil gave final gift, small pouch of seeds. These are from gardens here. Plant them when you return home. They'll grow into something beautiful. Living reminder of this journey. And when they bloom, you'll remember that endings and beginnings are two faces of same coin. Next morning, Layla prepared to depart. Journey home would be different. She'd travel with group heading west toward trade routes, joining caravans that would return her to familiar lands. Rashida walked with her to city's edge. You came seeking cure and found something else. Are you disappointed? Layla considered carefully. I thought I would be, but no. I'm sad because I'm losing something I can't replace, but I'm also grateful for Journey, for what it's taught me, for who I'm becoming. You've learned wisdom of both, and rather than either or, you can be sad and grateful. You can grieve and grow. You can let go and still hold on to what matters. This is maturity. This is grace. Journey home took weeks. Layla rejoined Rashid's caravan at Last Wells, where Yusuf greeted her with knowing smile. You found what you needed, he said, which wasn't quite same thing, Layla agreed. Green roads, when they reached them, felt impossibly lush. Layla had forgotten richness of growing things, abundance of water. It was beautiful, but she saw it differently now. Tariq found her at first large oasis where caravans converged. I had to know you were safe, he said. They talked through evening, Layla sharing what she could. Before they parted, he played for her, melody he'd composed during her absence. It was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. Thank you for waiting, for caring, for your friendship, she said. More than friendship, at least for me. But I understand you have your own path. Maybe someday our paths will align more permanently, or maybe they won't. Either way, I'm glad we met. Final leg from green roads to her city passed in blur. Layla's heart beat faster with each familiar landmark, and then, finally, city walls appeared on horizon, honey-colored in afternoon light. She was home. Chapter 12. The releasing house looked smaller than she remembered. Blue door stood unmarked by her absence, eternally same. She touched it once, gently, greeting old friend, then pushed it open and stepped inside. Her father was in courtyard, sitting on bench beneath fig tree. He looked frailer than when she'd left, noticeably thinner, breathing more labored, but his face when he saw her transformed with such joy that Layla felt her heart might break from fullness. Daughter, he breathed, rising slowly, you came back. She rushed to him, embracing carefully, aware of fragility but unable to resist need for closeness. They held each other and wept. I came back as I promised, and I brought something for you. Not what I hoped to bring, but something. They sat together, and Layla told him everything. About desert, trials, city beyond stones. About what Khalil had said, what remedy could and couldn't do. Her father listened without interrupting. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only afraid of suffering, of being burdened, of losing myself before I truly go. If what you've brought can ease that passage, can let me go gently and in my own time, Then you've brought exactly what I needed. But I couldn't save you, daughter. He took her face in his hands. You did save me. You saved me from dying without knowing my daughter could face world on her own, could walk impossible paths and return transformed. You've shown me you're strong, capable, brave, wise. That's greatest gift you could have given me. They talked through afternoon and into evening. Over following days and weeks, they settled into new rhythm. Layla reopened shop, managing it fully now. She planted seeds Khalil had given her in courtyard, creating small new garden. As they grew, she told her father their story. She opened scroll and began reading its teachings. They spoke of patterns and threads, of how consciousness moved through life and death. She practiced exercises it prescribed, and gradually found she could indeed sense things others couldn't. She knew when someone was about to visit moments before they knocked. She felt emotional undercurrents in conversations. She understood what people truly needed beyond what they asked for. These gifts made her better at running shop. Word spread that Hamza's daughter had touch, intuition, way of knowing. Business improved. Life continued. But through all this was knowledge, unspoken but always present, that her father was declining. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but steadily, like tide going out. There were good days and harder days when breathing was difficult, when pain crept in despite herbs and care. On night when moon was full and city quiet, her father called her to sit with him. He was in bed, propped up with cushions, breathing labored, but mind clear. "It's time," he said simply. "I can feel it. My body is ready to stop fighting, to rest, and I'm ready too. I've had good life. I've loved and been loved. I've created beauty. I've known you. There's nothing left unfinished that matters." Layla felt tears come. "I know. I've been feeling it too. Remedy you brought. Will you give it to me? Will you help me go gently while I'm still myself, while I can still tell you I love you and know you understand?" This was moment she'd been dreading and preparing for simultaneously. Moment when love meant letting go, when holding on became cruelty rather than devotion. "Yes," she said, voice breaking but firm. "Yes, I'll help you. I love you too much to let you suffer." They sat together through evening, talking of small things and large things and everything between. Her father told final stories about his youth, about her mother, about music he'd made and life they'd shared. Layla listened, committing every word to memory. When night was deep and house perfectly quiet, Layla brought out small carved box. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing tiny vial within. "Just one drop," Khalil had said. "I'm afraid," her father admitted. "Not of death itself, but of leaving you, of you being alone. I won't be alone. You'll be with me always, in memory, in love, in everything you taught me. And I have friends now, community. I'll be sad, but I'll be okay. I promise you, Father. I'll be okay." He smiled. "I believe you. You've proven you can walk hard roads. You'll walk this one too. Are you ready?" she asked, holding vial. "Yes, but first, play for me. Your mother's out. One last song." So Layla took up instrument and played melody Tariq had taught her. But as she played, she felt something shift. Music deepening, becoming more than just notes, becoming prayer and blessing and farewell and love, all woven together in sound. Her father closed his eyes, listening, and on his face was perfect peace. When song ended, he opened eyes one last time. "Beautiful. Your mother would be so proud. I'm so proud. I love you, now and always, in this life and whatever comes after. And I love you, daughter of my heart. Thank you for this life. Thank you for this ending. Thank you for being exactly who you are." She placed single drop on his tongue. He swallowed, settled back into cushions, and closed eyes. His breathing, which had been labored for so long, gradually became easier, slower, more peaceful. Layla held his hand, singing softly, not words, just melody, lullaby, sending off song. And there, in deep hours of night, with moonlight streaming through window and fountain whispering in courtyard, Hamza released his hold on life and slipped away. Gently, peacefully, held in love until very end. Layla sat with him long time after, tears flowing freely, but heart somehow at peace. She had done what she set out to do, not saved him from death, but given him gift of gentle crossing, and in process she had saved herself too, had discovered who she was, what she could endure, how much she could grow when she trusted path before her. As dawn began to lighten sky, she went to courtyard, to small garden where Khalil's seeds had grown into flowering plants. They were blooming now, their petals exact color of turquoise thread, that blue-green that spoke of waters both deep and clear, of sky meeting earth, of journeys completed and new journeys just beginning. She touched thread on her wrist and whispered, "Thank you. For this path, for this love, for this life. I'll walk forward from here. I'll become what I'm meant to become. I'll honor both loss and living." Wind rose, gentle but definite, carrying scent of flowering plants, sound of fountain, first calls of birds greeting dawn. And in that wind, Layla felt, or knew, or imagined, presence of both her parents, no longer separate but somehow united, together in whatever realm existed beyond visible, watching over her with love and pride and blessing. Life would continue. Shop would open. Customers would come. She would grieve and laugh and work and grow. She would develop her gifts, follow teachings, perhaps someday help others on their own journeys as she'd been helped on hers. But for now, in this moment of ending and beginning, she simply stood in her courtyard, wrapped in morning light, surrounded by flowers' color of impossible hope, and let herself feel everything, sadness and gratitude, loss and love, ending and promise of all yet to come. Turquoise thread pulsed once with warmth, as if in agreement or blessing or farewell. And Layla, daughter of Hamza, an inheritor of mysteries, walker of spiral paths and holder of both grief and grace, took deep breath and stepped forward into rest of her life.